You want to break into and navigate your career in the pharma and biotech industry. We know how to teach you. This is the Biotech Project. From sales to medical affairs and everything in between, we're talking about it. No matter how you got here, from here to your next role is up to you, and we're here to help. You'll hear from guests in every role, from CEO to sales, recruiters to hiring managers. The Biotech Project. Here are your hosts, Scott Resnick and Dr. John Walsh.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Biotech Project. We are really excited today to be here with Kelly Covello. Kelly comes to us with well over 10 years of experience in the biopharmaceutical industry on the medical space, and currently heads up a medical team at an emerging biotech. So I, especially as the medical representative here on the Biotech Project, I'm super excited to have a colleague who can be able to share a lot of her background. So welcome, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Kelly, welcome to the show. Normally when we start out our show, we love to, kind of plug ourselves and talk about, the website and whatnot. But we wanted to make sure that we took a moment today, and those of you that are watching us can see John and I, our virtual backgrounds are a little bit different today. We wanted to kind of talk about what's going on over in Ukraine. Our industry has a very heavy presence in both Russia and the Ukraine, and a lot of research is done over there. A lot of manufacturing is done over there, and it would be remiss of us not to take a moment to send thoughts and prayers to our colleagues that are over there that are suffering and going through this really traumatic time, and our thoughts are prayers and prayers are with them. And John, you and I both as emergency service providers also, there's another side of it too, right? The folks that are over there handling that end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, Scott, we've all had either current or former colleagues who are working within the industry who are operating there right now, and I can only imagine how difficult it is. Most importantly, on a personal level for them and their family and their friends, but also again in the future, looking into the industry there certainly will have impacts on our industry as well. I know, as you alluded to, many trials are done there, and the European pharma groups, as well as some of the U.S. pharma groups, fortunately, have already started talking about provisions for some aid and help to people in that region, as well as to different companies that operate within that region. So again, our thoughts and prayers are with them, and especially for the people who are on the front lines of this whole thing. And I can't say it enough. We really hope things resolve soon and things improve.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kelly, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So, I mean, as we begin today, what we'd really love to do is we do with everybody who comes on is to really use the opportunity in the time that we have today to learn a little bit about you in particular. And the purpose of the Biotech Project is really to share with people what each of our individual stories are, because I really believe that the stories we each have resonate with someone out there somewhere, right? So I'm sure your background and your experiences in the industry will really click for someone and hopefully many who are out there. So maybe we'll just start off by you give a brief introduction about who you are, what you're doing right now, and kind of how you got where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me. I'm a PhD by training, and I've been in the industry for over 15 years now. All oncology, super passionate about oncology. I got lucky in that I started there very early and just fell in love with the unmet need and the value and impact that we can bring to the patients. And I've been lucky to have different roles across the continuum. As I was during my grad school experience, I learned pretty quickly that I did not want to be in the lab forever. but my path, my experience was in the lab. So I was able to make the transition from academia into industry at a large pharmaceutical company as a research investigator. And while it was the lab, I learned a lot around drug discovery, from concept through developing molecules and validating them and bringing them into the clinic. And was also able to work on projects that had a lot of luck for them and were able to transition into the clinic. So I got exposure over those first few years to working with clinical development teams and even commercial, and how they thought about the assets and how they would either go through the drug development process, or also then how it could potentially be brought to market and really be prescribed for patients. And so I used that time for the first 4 years in the lab at a pharma company to figure out what else was out there. I knew I liked science. I liked talking about the science, loved teaching. I liked working with people, and I really felt connected to the disease and oncology in particular, and what the companies could do in terms of impact and scale. And so I learned there's a lot out there for people, with a background in a PhD that didn't want to be in a lab forever. Um, and so there were a lot of great opportunities. One did open up in US medical affairs, and it was on a product that was on the market for about 4 or 5 years at the time, but it was going through personalized medicine. And so which was very new a long time ago, the concept of targeted therapies for a specific biomarker selected patient population. And so luckily I had that background. I understood molecular biology and signal transduction, and why it was intuitive that a mutation in that gene would make that patient maybe not have a good response to the therapy. So I made that transition, but then I brought that to the team, but I learned the whole other world out there related to the US market, and how drugs are really commercialized, and how somebody in medical affairs could support the safe and effective use of a drug, and continue around the data generation, because the gaps will still exist even years after on the market. So it was a really great experience, and haven't looked back. People often ask if I miss the lab. Sometimes I do. I definitely love the lab, but I really have been able to take my skills and experience and learn new things, which I really love in medical affairs. And so since I've been in different roles across different companies within medical, there's US roles, there's global roles, worked across different tumor types and even biomarker and diagnostics. Even I was lucky enough to take roles in clinical development as well. So I've been able to learn as I go and get different experiences in leadership roles within clinical development. Most of my career until the past couple of years was large pharma. So I worked across 3 large pharma companies, slightly different. There was private companies, public companies, companies based in U.S., headquarters based in U.S., and then companies based ex-U.S. So all great learning experiences, but all pharma, which was wonderful. I worked with cool people, learned on really great drugs, and I learned a lot. But there was something attractive about just a biotech, and really being able to roll up your sleeves with surrounded by like-minded people, everybody working together, working hard, trying to figure things out and grow from scratch. And so this position opened up as the head of medical affairs, and it was a dream job for me. It's a company, it's oncology focused, so a very small biotech with a few things in the clinic, but all oncology. Lead indications, lung cancer, which was I have a passion for and strong experience with. And opportunity to build something from scratch, like a whole team, capability, function, white space. It doesn't really happen all that often. And so luckily, I got the job, and I started almost 2 years ago now. So it's crazy how fast the time goes. It's been amazing. It's been a lot of work for sure, a lot of learning and a lot of work, but it's been really a great experience. When I joined, I was employee 1 for Med Affairs, employee 124 for the company. Now we're over 500 people at the company. Med Affairs is up to almost 50 people. So a lot of change, a lot of growth, but a lot of work, as I said, but you just see the work making an impact, whether it's to help the team, the company, or the physicians and patients we're working for, especially as we're now getting ready to hopefully launch our first product. So super exciting. And that's kind of me in a nutshell, but happy to chat further.
I have so many questions to ask you. So, number one, having been in the oncology space for the better part of my career, I thank you for what you do in the lab days, because I think a lot of people forget that you can't have something go to clinic if it hasn't started in the lab. So, that's really just want to say that. Um, you mentioned going from pharma to biotech. So I'm asked all the time by people, and even in my family, what's the difference between pharma and biotech? So I think everybody has their own definition. I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on, what differentiates pharma from biotech in your world.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I get that one often as well. I think, obviously, and like I said, pharma was wonderful. I learned a lot, worked with great people on really cool drugs. And a lot of opportunity there. Biotech is definitely very different. It's obviously a much smaller group of people, a lot to do, less resource, less people to get things done, a lot of white space as you grow and scale. I think what I find really great about biotech is just the ability to get the right people together in a room, make a decision, and then be able to act. It's been really, incredibly helpful as we've built out a team and capability over the last couple of years, both on the medical side and now on commercial side as well. And so that part's really great. And I also really just enjoy the people I work with. It's definitely a bunch of folks that are fearless, which is great. Just want to accomplish a lot with not a lot of people, and just stuff almost seems impossible. But everybody's got that spirit of, hey, we're going to figure this out. It's not going to be easy. It will be bumpy, but we're going to work hard, work together, and do whatever we can to make it happen. And so that's really exciting, and I think with that also comes new opportunity to wear multiple hats, learn new things, and just figure things out that you never thought you'd be figuring out before. So that's definitely been, a real draw to the biotech side of things. It's not without challenge, though. There's a lot of change, as I said, and a lot to do, and not a lot of time, not a lot of resource compared to like maybe the large pharmas that do have that infrastructure already baked, and even those that have gone through a new launch at a pharma. That in itself can be pretty intense, even with that established infrastructure. There's a lot of change. I mean, as I said, I was employee 1 for Med Affairs, 124 for the company, probably 5 across medical affairs, commercial. And now it's just every month changed. Every year you look back and we doubled in size. And so there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of building while you fly, a lot of just not needing to be okay with not knowing all the answers, and just knowing that things might change tomorrow, and you need to just kind of figure out how to pivot. So,
For
yeah, I
sure.
think those are the big differences.
Just to piggyback off of that. So again, a lot of similarities in where our careers have gone. So I started out in huge, big mega pharma, one of the biggest in the world. And early on, I transitioned into a smaller pharma company, but then I've transitioned into, really tiny companies. So I was employee number 8 out of 12. I was employee number 41 out of 50. And, what I love about this smaller, biotech world is kind of some of the things you alluded to. Decision making tends to be quicker. There's, you get more input. The way it was worded to me, the way I ended up in a smaller company was I had a clinical investigator. I was working at a very big company. I was a hospital rep, and one of my big investigators that was a big key target came to me and said, I'm working with a startup company, and they're looking to put their first commercial force together, and I think you should meet with them. And I said, no, you're crazy. I love big pharma. I love the security, the blanket. There's a million jobs to go to, all that stuff. And she said, well, yeah, but you're a little tiny fish in the giant ocean in an organization. You can see what it's like to be, a big fish in a really small pond. And that resonated with me. And that's, when people will ask me or say, oh, I don't know if I want to leave one of the giants to go to a startup. And, I always refer to that. So I guess what would be great to hear you talk about, having made that transition, is what's been the biggest challenge and what's been the biggest like positive surprise to making that jump from, big pharma to startup biotech.
Yeah, I think no, definitely resonates everything you've said as well. And I hear that a lot from new team members coming in, whether they're coming in from biotech or pharma. I think the biggest challenge right now is just the pace of change and the speed at which we work. But the biggest upside is just the impact. You feel it, you see it on a day to day basis. Everything you do matters. Like you're doing it because it needs to get done, and it's not going into like a black hole and or wondering what the output was. And I think related to that, what I hear often is everybody has a voice. I mean, there's at the large companies, there's layers and there's multiple teams, and sometimes you have to figure out how to influence there. Where it's a little bit more challenging to figure out how things work, especially as you get further removed. Here, it's like it's one medical team. Everybody's around the table. There's one, development team. Every, medical represents the broader team on that. There's one, executive team, and obviously, and we got a seat at the table there. So it's very easy to have a voice and really not only make the impact of doing the work on a daily basis, but then also have your ideas and point of view heard and shared. It's easy to share and it's easy to have it heard. No matter what your level. I mean, I think so. It's a lot of big fish in a little sea here. Everybody's a big
Yep.
fish for sure.
Sure. And, one of the other things that you mentioned was your transition through clinical development roles as well as medical roles, and they can look and feel differently. So what are some of the different muscles that you flex in the different roles? What do you see the primary skills that you're using, let's say, in a clinical development role, and how might that differ from a medical affairs role for people who are listening, let's say with a medical or scientific background, who are like, hey, I don't know what to do with this. Where do I go in the industry?
Yeah, no, a lot of different parts of the brain for sure. I would say, and a lot of different skills and experiences. And I have a passion for everything, for all of them. I often get, well, which do you like better, and are you going to land in one versus the other? And I think the versatility and the breadth is really a strength as well, or just gives you different perspective because you're walking in other people's shoes. So I would say, in the lab, obviously a lot of the experience and skills there are just understanding the science, staying abreast of the technologies, the data, the disease, the pathways, but working in teams and good communication is always essential, as well as communicating with different audiences, especially as your assets start going into the clinic and you're working with more cross-functional team members. I would say as you go to medical affairs, I always say that it's just we have a job to do, and it revolves around data and science. And so there is a part of that where understanding and being able to interpret not only the preclinical science or translational medicine, but also the clinical data, but also then applying or thinking through what are the gaps and how do we generate data to address those gaps, whether they be clinical, translational, economic, whatever. And communication skills are super key in medical affairs. Even more so, I would say, just you get more and more diverse audiences. You could be talking to an international thought leader with a very specific expertise in a pathway 1 hour, and the next hour you could be talking to the lay person trying to develop materials for patient trials and for patients for trial recruitment, and everywhere in between. So definitely a lot more breadth, I would say, in terms of the types of conversations you're having and the types of things you're trying to conquer. I'd say medical affairs, you have your job, but you're also firefighting. So just the pace, you have to be able to multitask, juggle, go between these different things, solve issues very, very quickly. I think speed is definitely a key feature in med affairs. Um, on the development side, I would say it's probably a mix of the two because you're somewhat in the middle there. I think it's a lot more it's a lot more thinking through all, the forward looking of the trial designs or the asset strategy, not only for like the next year or two, but like, 5 to 10 years, and how you can position the studies, and ancillary activities for success, if everything continues to go well. And so you need to take that step back and really think through all of the implications. And I would say the stakeholders you're working with there can be pretty broad as well. When I was a development team lead, obviously I had the medical scientific background, but working with CMC manufacturing and getting deep into the statistics, or working with our clinical operations team to understanding how the studies were mobilized, and just again, similar skills in terms of problem solving, working together in teams, and but also then learning to ask questions when you're not an expert, and really help to problem solve when you're working with people that have a lot more expertise, than you do, but just still helping to guide, understand risks assessments, and escalate that to management.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's super important, obviously, that we run the right trials that have the endpoints that the regulatory bodies are looking for, so that we achieve approval. But yet, at the end of the day, we also need a product that's saleable. We need a product that meets the needs of the payers, the patients, policymakers, providers, everyone. So those are a lot of people to be serving through one development program, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's why I always encourage people, even if they have a passion for one versus the other, to get experience in the other person's shoes, because it just makes you better. It understands kind of what their day to day is and what their challenges may be. You understand more of a common language, and yeah, it just makes you more well rounded. So I think that's the beauty of kind of some of I think medical affairs and R&D clinical development is you can make these transitions, because you're learning so much and there's a lot of transferable skills.
So that's a good lead. And one of the things we really try and talk about is people that want to transition from one role to another. Commercial, there's 60 different roles you can transition to. Medical, obviously, there's field medical people, there's, research and development. So how did you decide that you wanted to make that move, and what was kind of the path you took to make that transition from, bench into, the other side of medical affairs?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of my transitions, I don't know if I had a like defined path. It was almost a learn what's out there, learn what the different roles, especially as I was earlier on in my career, learn what's out there for people like me, in quotes, with that background and experience. Learn other people's paths, like how they made the transitions, what their actual day to day job was, what the challenges were. I would literally go to like our company's, HR website where they post positions, and they would all sound the same to me. Coming from the lab, I think I understood that area, but I didn't understand all the other jobs. They all kind of sounded similar, so I just used the time to network and talk to folks, and some things I learned, okay, that maybe is not what I would want to do or would be good at, but hey, oh, these do maybe sound of interest, and things I could bring something to that would be unique and provide value while I got to learn the other pieces. So I'd say that was probably throughout my career some component of that. So there's and I think there's only so much you can learn by talking to folks. Some of it you just have to learn by doing and,
Yep.
getting a sense. Oh, I like this, or oh, maybe I thought this might be something different. And, while it was a great experience, maybe not what I want to do long term. Um, so I think, that was probably the early part of my career in learning, all the stuff out there and what people have done. I think later on in my career, it's been more of like, well, what else can I do, learn? What else can I bring my skills to make a difference? And just, like the people I work with and feel like I'm making, an impact to cancer patients. So, like I got a lot of experience in medical affairs across the different functions, US and global roles, across different tumor types, biomarkers, diagnostics, and also companies. So I feel like I kind of I saw a lot of medical affairs, and so that was kind of, I had the choice of becoming a functional leader at a large pharma, or getting more experience on the development side. Um, and for me, I still like the data and the science, and I felt being like a development team leader would keep me close to the team and the data and the science on the day to day. And so that was just really a great experience to kind of round me out. But then this position opened up as a functional leader at a biotech, and I couldn't pass it up. And I'm still involved in the day to day and the science as well, but obviously have a team to really there to focus on the external engagement and the day to day. And so a lot of my role is helping to integrate the function, do a lot of the like thinking through how we're going to grow and evolve the team over the next few years, and then just building relationships with my peers and leadership to make sure that we're integrating effectively and bringing our ideas to their different activities and influencing there.
Yeah, cool. And I mean, you talked about how you made that foray, right? So looking back now, like, if you looked at all of this in the rearview mirror to where you are today, if you had to throw out a few pro tips, things that someone who's still at the bench, who's considering the idea of doing something different, what are some pro tips that you would offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one is just network and talk to people. I mean, that's how I learned a lot. Even 15 years ago when making the transition from academia to pharma. The more people you talk to, the more you get perspective, the more you get lessons, and the more connections you make. That also help to make the different transitions. I always say as a hiring manager, you get hundreds of resumes, and it's always difficult to weed through all of those and figure out, the needles in the haystack and what makes the most sense. But if somebody hands me a resume and say this person's, amazing to work with, great team player, really smart, hardworking, can figure things out, that kind of goes a long way. Or any type of initiative or resourcefulness, even if it is, starting to build your network out. So that's probably number one. I would say number two is just be open minded and not only about your potential and what you can or can't do, but also just how you might get there. I think I would have never. There's a lot of roles that I had along my way that maybe were not traditional. I made the transition from academia to pharma without a postdoc. I'm now a head of medical affairs with a PhD, not an MD. And there have been a lot of those where I think be confident and know that there are exceptions to the rules. So and things change on a the fields evolve, so things may change. So focus on the skills that you're building and the experiences you're getting, and don't take no for an answer. Be confident in yourself. But then also be open-minded in terms of how you get there too, because not only are things changing, but it's not a ladder, it's a jungle gym. There's a lot of lateral moves.
Yeah.
It's really about getting for me at least, the breadth of experience and all the things you can learn. And there's not a defined path. At least for me, I never had like a goal in mind. I still don't. It's more about, all right, well, what else can I do to get a different experience for me that rounds me out? What can I bring to that role to make a difference and an impact? And am I going to like the people I work with and like what I'm doing on a day to day basis? Because that's like one of the most important things for me. So I think just knowing that there's not going to be probably a defined path for folks. It's about just figuring out what makes sense at the right time for you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that too,
Yeah.
because how many
Yep.
times many of us have been sitting and someone usually senior to you who's sitting in the room says, "So where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Right? And that question is always a little bit of a double-edged sword. I think many people have a very clear idea. This is what I want to do and how I want to get there. And that's great. And it's perfect. But I think there's also an equal number and maybe even a greater number of people who I like to, and my career has been much like that too. I feel it more opportunistic. There's this new opportunity, looks
Yep.
exciting or interesting to me, or it offers something that sets off my passion to go to work. And that takes me to the next job, role, task, product, et cetera. So I think it's really great that you touched on that. And I don't think people need to be so afraid of that question sometimes. It's totally awesome to be able to see what's there and take advantage of it. It's perfect.
Yeah, no,
Y yeah,
I
definitely.
remember vividly the first time one of my mentors said that they felt the same way, and I felt a little bit of a relief because I felt like I was surrounded by people that knew exactly what they wanted to do. And so I like to be very transparent, and that I still, I'm not sure what I'd want to do 5 to 10 years from now. But that's okay. And I think the best advice is just have goals, have things, aspirations. So you're building towards something, getting different experiences and skills. But they're all going to be relevant if your aspirations or goals change as well, and that's okay.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And speaking of change, I think it's a great kind of segue into, we always end up getting into this because here we are, just over 2 years now into the pandemic, and we're recording this very close to the State of the Union address, where the president talked about us entering this new phase of COVID and learning to live with it and it becoming endemic and all this other stuff. So, there's been a lot of changes that have affected both commercial and the medical side of things. And then you take it a step further, right? Being in the oncology space. So I've been in oncology almost 15 years now. And saying you've been in oncology and for 15 years is like saying you've been in another disease state for like 50, because of the way things change in our world. When I was involved with my first immuno-oncology, people thought, we were crazy. The immune system in oncology, it's fake voodoo medicine, I was told. And here we are now in a world where we're not only talking about immuno-oncology, but we're talking personalized, individualized immuno-oncology. So, things change so much. So what do you think the biggest changes coming forward in your world are with the kind of changes that have happened with COVID? I know you mentioned one of them, being able to work more remotely opens up opportunities for people. So, what do you think? And what do you think the biggest growth opportunity is going to be for people that are trying to make moves in our space and in the medical affairs area?
Yeah, I think we're still figuring out what the new normal will be. Every time we think that it's around the corner, it seems like it's extended.
Yep.
I think so. I took this role like 2 years ago. I joked that I was the only one on the team that actually interviewed in the building. And the day I flew back was the day states started shutting down. So we've been able to really build out during this, knowing at least, for the foreseeable future, we'd be in this kind of world, virtual world. So from like a hiring recruiting standpoint, prior to the pandemic, the company's philosophy is that they wanted everyone to be based in the city that the headquarters was based, because there was something to be said out of a small company. You can get everyone around a table and make a
Yep.
decision, and everyone does happy hour every day together. But we proved really quickly that you can still get work done virtually. And you can still put your videos on and see people and make jokes and still build relationships. And so we also showed that you can build a team. We made the case to be able to hire virtually as well, and really build a top talented team across the US and Europe as well now. That you could still retain productivity, communication, everybody getting around the Zoom table or the Teams table now to kind of have a conversation, and still have fun and build relationships. So I think moving forward, that's going to allow us to continue that sticking with that will allow us to continue to tap into the top talent, regardless of where people live. There's still something to be said when you do get together. We've been doing that now, where once a month we'll come together, and that's really special. But you can still really build a high functioning, productive, fun loving team virtually. So
Sure.
I like that that's going to hopefully be here to stay in the future. In terms of like medical affairs and how we operate externally and how we do our job, I think, you know, I, I think it's going to be probably a mix of the old and the new. Obviously, for the last 2 years, we've been engaging externally very productively. It's all we've known here. And we had some exciting assets and trials to talk to people about at the thought leaders and the investigators at the site. So it's been very easy to kind of set up time, and you can talk to people across different time zones or continents all in the same day, whether regardless of what role you're in. So like you can have a much more packed full day that's not being spent traveling, driving out to the sites or centers.
Sure.
Um, but I think, and we've been able to do that one-on-one roundtables, as well as like advisory boards and ad councils. But I think there's still something to be said about face to face. I know there's been a couple conferences here or there. Our team's starting to get back out into the field and kind of make the visits. And so I think there's still something to be said for that, as well. But I think we'll see a hybrid going forward, so that you can have those timely, relevant conversations efficiently and quickly, but then also spend time either at the centers or at the conferences meeting folks and continue to build those relationships as well. So I think that's kind of what we're anticipating as we go into the next couple of years of the new normal.
Absolutely. And hopefully we're rounding third a little bit with the COVID pandemic and things do start to level out. I think your point before about there's always seems to be this next thing. Hopefully the next thing is behind us and we're able to transition. But without a doubt, I think this whole COVID situation has opened doors for a lot of people also, as much as it's been challenging, right? As examples, I have a few colleagues who were not based in some of the major cities around the country where biopharma is based. And intelligent people, really super at what they do, but generally were limited about some of the roles that they could take because for personal reasons or family reasons couldn't or were not able to move to one of those particular cities. So here they are now finding themselves in roles that they normally wouldn't. So I think it reshapes our industry. I think it's going to bring us to a whole different place. And like we are, we're resilient, and hopefully we use a lot of this to our advantage.
Yeah,
Yep, for sure.
absolutely. And, I think we should definitely spend a minute since we can pick your brain about uh, such a super specialty like oncology that, as we said before, there's just changes every minute. You can't look at the news or an industry website without seeing something new getting approved that, was science fiction just a short while ago. CAR Ts, DNA repair, gene therapies, all this. So, what do you think, as somebody that's looking to maybe get into oncology, what do you think are some of the technologies and some of the emerging kind of things that they should be looking into to find maybe an organization that they should be targeting themselves, looking at for opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I think there's the short term answer and then maybe the longer term answer. I think my medical affairs hat, short term clinical hat, short term answers. Within oncology, as you said, I was also part of the IO immuno-oncology kind of revolution where every year was like 10 in terms of number of launches. Whether they be my company or the competitors, but you just saw so much and so much
Yes.
change and just learnings. I think the immunotherapies have done great things for patients across the board, but not all patients derive, the long-term benefit and or derive benefit at all. So the resistance is definitely an area of popular exploration to figure out options for those patients that either have a benefit and go on to progress or just blow right through the initial immunotherapy. So that's definitely an area, and I think there's a lot of great progress there, in clinical development that, from a medical affairs hat or clinical hat, you can kind of sink your teeth into. Similarly, on the targeted therapy side, I think there's now a lot of efforts around, drugging the undruggable. And so I think that's probably short term and long term. I think there's some targets that have been historically difficult to target, and through new chemistry efforts, folks have been able to figure out how to do that. And now, like the different platforms that can degrade proteins, I think I'm super excited about. We don't do that here, but I think that is definitely a hot area where you're starting to see some of those more yeah, historically known to be important oncogenes that or are modifiers that you couldn't target, now being able to have traction to be able to figure out how to get to them. And so we'll see how those bear out in the clinic. But I think a lot of promise there. And then, yeah, I mean, the other piece that I've always had as a pet project is just the vaccines and cellular therapy. A little less that a little bit kind of under the immunotherapy or immuno-oncology bucket, but I think a little bit more spacey, if you will, especially around the vaccines. And so I think they're getting smarter in terms of how to develop those and amplify the immune response. So hopefully we'll see traction there as well, and associated with vaccines that your symptoms are flu-like symptoms, and then you can kind of go on and not kind of be dealing with some of the adverse events that you see sometimes with the other drugs.
So, I'll share. Just about 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and when I had my nephrectomy, we saved tissue for a potential vaccine down the road. And I've been involved in a therapeutic vaccine in the oncology space, also. And I guess my question is, maybe you can share with us a little behind the curtain. You know, are we getting there with some of these? Are we getting there with a vaccine, potentially for a specific tumor, individualized, and then an off the shelf, which would be the granddaddy, right? You know, how far off do you see the first opportunities, both for maybe more like phase 2, 3 studies, a little further off the bench, and then eventually for the commercial folks? When do you think these things might be coming down the pike?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always hard to say because drug discovery and development's tough, right? But I had worked on a cancer vaccine back in like 2020, no, for that 2016, so quite some time ago, and that then unfortunately it was two negative phase 3 trials. Um, but I think to your point, we've gotten smarter about it, and there's more personalized approaches that you're seeing, whether it's on how to make the vaccine or who to give it to. We've also learned that maybe just the vaccine is not sufficient, and you need to kind of build a better adjuvant for it to boost the effects. For not only just provide the antigen, but then also boost the immune system
Hmm.
to kind of pair that and have that then fight the tumor. So there is stuff in the clinic right now. So staying optimistic, and the speed at which they go is dependent on the data and the results. But I'm hopeful that that will be coming one day and continue to kind of round out the types of ways we're trying to figure out and target cancer, which is obviously still a huge unmet need.
That's awesome. I mean, the perspective that we're getting closer to the end goal here, and then again hearing the president talk about the moonshot and funding these things. I mean, it's um, I think that the layperson doesn't understand our industry. That the reason why certain drugs and treatments and therapeutics cost so much is to help recoup and refund research in these areas. And some of the things I think researchers are able to do now, especially in oncology and other disease states, is they're able to find ways to treat these ultra rare diseases and these ultra rare cancers where you may see 2,000 across the entire US in a year. Normally that would be something that a company would never, touch because of the cost of development and then, trying to treat those patients. But we're able to do that now. And just wanted to get your thoughts. I read an article recently on AI and how AI is really changing the landscape for drug development, especially with targeted therapies. Any experience there, and any thoughts on where that's going?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you said, and I think as we started earlier, the people in the lab have probably the toughest job. I mean, science is hard, in developing drugs and getting them through the development process into the market is really, really hard. And so I do think that there's a lot of efforts ongoing that'll hopefully continue to get us there one day. But it is there's a lot of even the best science. the tumors are smart and they're very complex. And the science isn't always so easy there. So, I'm optimistic that we'll get there in the future. But yeah, you are seeing now even more. I told you about this when I made the transition to medical affairs. It was for an asset targeted therapy being targeted towards a very specific biomarker selected patient population. And you're seeing that now, whether it's even carving up the tumor, either completely niche tumors where there's unmet need and maybe companies haven't really prioritized. You're seeing more of that now, or even the larger tumors as you start to segment them up, and you're seeing tumor. Maybe 2% of the disease has that particular mutation, and so I think you just while it's hard, just continue to chip away and just continue to make that. If you think of it as a pie chart, like the part that's not druggable, like smaller and smaller, and hopefully we get more and more options as the science evolves. And AI, I think that's like the hottest, one of the hottest things out there across the industry. Hopefully making an impact not only for drug discovery, but also the way we do trials, and then potentially the way that we educate externally. So, still, I think I'm not personally aware of any like success stories yet on the drug discovery side, but hopefully, continue to leverage all of the knowledge and science that's out there, and innovations will continues to help us to carve out that or flesh out that pie chart and fulfill all the unmet needs out there.
Well, I mean, you referred to cancers, of course, being really smart, right? And what I wanted to do today is to thank you and your colleagues and all of our colleagues collectively who work in oncology, because it's them as a group being smart that will beat this whole thing, and we see it happening all the time. Just look at the advances over the recent years. But I did want to take these last couple of minutes to thank you so much for being with us today. This has been absolutely super. As always, we learn a lot. We hope our listeners learn a lot. And I know your time is precious and you're busy as possibly can be to do what you do. So thank you. And thank you to your colleagues for staying on top of the oncology front for us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed talking with you guys too.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. We certainly appreciate it. And, as we wrap up the show, once again, our thoughts and prayers are with all the people in Ukraine. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on another episode of the Biotech Project. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to the Biotech Project. Scott and John have 50 years of combined expertise, with roles that have covered everything from frontline sales to senior vice president of medical affairs. Scott and John are industry veterans, equipping you with knowledge from guests in every role from CEO to sales, recruiters to hiring manager. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten some useful and practical information. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, check out the website at www.thebiotechproject.com. And for questions and comments, send an email to hosts@thebiotechproject.com. See you next time.